Hello and welcome to the Guardian Football Weekly. Ruben Amorim sacked by Manchester United about 5 minutes after we'd all said goodbye after recording yesterday. A message from Nick Ames landed in the WhatsApp group. Amorim! ! Which, as producer Joel says, looks like the title of a musical. And what a musical it would be. They definitely play 3-4-3. As is Football Weekly tradition, they waited until we'd finished. Turns out his post-match presser after the Leeds game was a 10 on the Maresca scale. How do we view his tenure? Not well. So many, is this the turning point? So many, have they turned a corner? And the following game, no. Was there anything good about it? And how much was his intransigence, the quality or the application of the players, or Jason Wilcox and above? And what happens next? DNA's Darren Fletcher's at the wheel. Oliver Glasner is the favourite. It does make sense. An elite Manchester United panel for you, your questions. And that's today's Guardian Football Weekly. On the panel today, Barry Glendenning, welcome.
Hi, Max.
Nooruddean Choudry, welcome.
Hello.
The Guardian's Manchester football correspondent, Jamie Jackson. All right, Jamie?
Greetings.
And from Morocco, just to get as far away as he possibly could from Old Trafford, John Brewin is here. Hey, John.
Hi, Max. Hi, team.
So Ruben Amorim has departed his role as head coach of Manchester United, not manager. He was appointed in November 2024. God, it feels like years before that, doesn't it? And with Manchester United sitting sixth in the Premier League, the club said the club's leadership has reluctantly made the decision that it is the right time to make a change. This will give the team the best opportunity of the highest possible Premier League finish. The club would like to thank Ruben for his contribution to the club and wishes him well for the future. Darren Fletcher will take charge of the team against Burnley on Wednesday. Amorim's coaching team have also left. He won 25 of his 63 games in charge. His 14-month stint is the shortest of a permanent manager since David Moyes was sacked after 8 months in 2014. According to Opta, he had the worst win ratio, 32%, the worst goals conceded per game ratio, 1.53, and the lowest clean sheet ratio, 15%. Some accolades for him to take with him of the Premier League era, that is. Look, Jamie, you're on the beat. Why has this happened now?
Well, I think he's just got a bit cheesed off. Well, both sides have really, but I mean, it all sort of kind of climaxed on Friday. He wasn't happy anyway because this Semenyo money, once Semenyo, looked like he's going to Manchester City, was not available for another sort of major signing as he sort of thought it would be. Logically, you can sort of see the thinking. But them saying no, you're not going to have that money is part of sort of reservations that they've had for a little while. 2 or 3 times this season I've been told, well, he needs to start winning, from people who sort of got a bit of power there, etc., etc. Mainoo's an interesting example of this. They didn't want to sell Mainoo because they thought Mainoo might outlast Amorim, which has now been proved. And obviously Mainoo's a really good player. He's 20 years old, kind of the future of United. And actually, when he said on Christmas Eve to us all, Kobbie Mainoo, quote, is the future of Manchester United, my ears pricked up. I was thinking, why is he saying that? Because he never picks the guy. He's not started in the Premier League and all the rest of it. And I think that was because he'd basically been told or was aware of the thinking. So Wilcox, on Friday, as I understand it, before our press conference, which was at 1:15 at Carrington, there was, let's say, a heated debate between Wilcox and Amorim with regard to the Wolves game when he'd gone back to a 3-4-3. They stunk the place out, really. They got a draw against Wolves. Wolves played all right, but, they arrived with 2 points, left with 3. And this was after he'd played a 4 against Newcastle on Boxing Day, and they looked half decent, actually. Dorgu played really well, so sort of right-sided number 10, scored the goal. Before at the back, and a little bit of tactical flexibility. But, there was that. And I actually sort of on Friday asked him about a comment he made on Christmas Eve, sort of when he said, actually, I may well switch my 3-4-3 because I'm now starting to understand that I can't get the big players for that system. And I thought, why is he saying that now, a year in? Did you not understand that when you came in? And basically, in a nutshell, I asked him that on Friday, and he sort of, I'm sure we're all aware of what happened. He batted it away, and then right at the end of the answer, he sort of said, well, yeah, you're a smart guy, as in you sort of sussed it a little bit, because I mentioned Wilcox or a chat about budget, and then that then led to Sunday post Leeds, and we all know what happened there. The sort of scattergun, very odd. I am the manager, not the head coach, and if you ask me, was it a back me or sack me? I thought it was just a sack me. That I just want to get out of here. So that's kind of my reading of it all.
So I mean, you are the smart guy, Jamie. That's the point. Is that the greatest compliment?
And well done, Jamie, for crowbarring that in. That it was you he was referring to.
Yeah. I mean, I just could not believe he said that, because on Christmas Eve, as I say, Kobbie Mainoo was the top line of that story. But at the end of the story, I remember speaking to John Brodkin, our football editor, and said, "Look, there's this quote at the end. On another day, I would suggest this is the top story. You know, him saying, I'm now starting to understand that I can't get the big players for my 3-4-3, so I need to change. I was like, you know, that's an interesting thing to say. As I say, over a year in, and that was basically the premise of my question on the Friday. I stored it up over a week later for the right moment to ask him. And so I asked him it. And it's interesting, in a sort of previous media world at United, you would not, or I would not have been allowed a follow-up and then a third follow-up. Basically, it used to be one question, like Ten Hag sort of times. You get one question and they try and take the microphone off you, or just, the press officer would, but because I was allowed to follow it up and then follow it up again, in the end he sort of broke. And when I mentioned Wilcox, he couldn't help himself.
You're like Paxman. You're like Paxman. Was it Heseltine? Just asking the same question again and again and again.
That's the one, yes.
You got him. This is your story. The reaction then from our Manchester United panelists.
I mean, it just feels like a complete mess to me. There was various reasons why United fans wanted the Glazers out. One was the obvious one about them leeching money out of the club, but the other was that they were not interested in football, and you kind of felt as if with Ineos, so you hoped that it would be football men making football decisions. What sort of concerns me most about this whole situation is I'm sad that Amorim's gone, and I liked him, but I can totally appreciate the argument for why he did go, because results weren't good enough. The thing that concerns me are these blurred lines and people interfering, and this idea that Ratcliffe's getting involved in things that don't concern him in terms of out of his expertise in terms of football, because I mean, first of all, Jamie will be able to sort of like provide sort of context for this, but I get the sense that the last week or so, Amorim has genuinely been trying to keep a lid on it. I think Amorim's tried not to sort of erupt, and I think it's Jamie doing his job, James Ducker doing his job. It's sort of they've got it out of him, and they've sort of like turn the knob, sort of like got him to sort of like sort of coax it out of him, and then he just erupted and said how he felt. But I think he was trying to keep a lid on it. But one of the most interesting comments I found was the Gary Neville comment, and this idea of him making a pointed comment to somebody about Gary Neville having too much of an influence. And I don't think that was a dig at Gary Neville, because Gary Neville just does his job as a pundit. I think that was a dig at somebody senior to him, basically saying, why are you listening to Gary Neville? Why are you paying attention to Gary Neville when you should be backing me? And reading between the lines, I don't think for 1 second, whatever you think of Wilcox, I don't think for 1 second, or Vivell, I don't think they would sort of turn around to Amorim and say like, oh, Gary Neville says this. But I do fear that someone like Ratcliffe would. And the sounds that we're hearing about sort of Ratcliffe wanting a 4-4-2, Ratcliffe sort of suggesting Mbeumo at fullback. It's like, who do you think you are? Like, Amorim doesn't advise sort of Ratcliffe on sort of petrol sort of like dollars, or like or like how to pollute the sort of environment. Like what
that we know of.
Yeah, that we know of. Who is Ratcliffe? And this is what concerns me about going forward. Like, you can say, okay, Ratcliffe was Amorim was the wrong guy, and fair enough, get rid of him. But what chance has the new guy got if you've got all this interference?
My favourite chairman getting involved story is at Cardiff City. Vincent Tan had seen a goalkeeper score a goal and then went to the manager, I forget who it was, and just saying, have you thought about getting your keeper to shoot? Is that such a crime? Like, let's really oversimplify this. John, I suppose on Amorim, before we get to upstairs and the sort of chaos above him, Vivell, the head of recruitment, isn't it? And Berardi and Wilcox.
Yeah.
Like, Amorim's intransigence with this formation, I mean, it has been tiring for podcasters. I mean, it must have been tiring for fans. It is odd, isn't it?
Well, the truth is that Manchester United just weren't fun to watch. They weren't appointment viewing. You'd close the curtains if they're playing in your back garden, sort of, because they were just bad to watch. Now, our Jeremy Paxman friend here, JJ, hit on something with the personality of Amorim. I always found him, when I've been in press conferences with him, quite immature. He's like a he's a 40-odd-year-old man. He has children. I was telling you, Max, that I was up in Macclesfield over Christmas. Some friends of mine had met him at sort of youth football with his sons playing it. They said, really nice guy, lovely man. But there was a prickliness about him. And he obviously has an ego, and he has that intransigence that you mentioned, and it doesn't fit in the structure such as it is at Manchester United. And people like Jamie here can ask him questions and they know that he's going to give an answer, and that actually, and as also as Jamie said, he self-detonated at a certain point. He just thought, I've had enough here. He will be okay. He'll get another job somewhere. He's out of the club. The football was terrible to watch. It was worse than it was under Ten Hag. And you name any list of these managers, I've forgotten how many there are now. You're yearning for Ralph Rangnick at a certain point. The results this season weren't that bad, but you also have to consider that there's so many other teams in transition, not really getting anywhere. They don't have Europe, so he's having all week to train the players, and then they still play this constipated Imodium football that I couldn't. It's funny. We were talking the other day, weren't we, about I'm off to Morocco. I'm at the African Cup of Nations. Are you going to watch the Leeds game? And I did catch the Leeds game, and I actually thought United played well in the second half. There was stuff happening. And you mentioned Mbeumo, that evening I saw him play for Cameroon, and that's not a fullback, Jim. He was the best creative player on the pitch. He looked absolutely wonderful, and it's like, and I'm sure we'll get onto the Jim thing, but the problem is billionaire egos control so much of our lives these days, don't they? And if a billionaire buys into a club, and Jim will put in a structure and say, oh, it's all about what, we'll work through the structure. The structure is actually what Jim says goes, and that's how he wants it to operate. And someone like Ruben Amorim, who has a sense of self-worth, is eventually going to turn around and say, I'm not having it. And that's essentially what's happened here. I'll miss the song. I won't miss Ruben Amorim. I don't think Ruben Amorim, apart from the nice cafes in Alderley Edge, will miss his time at Manchester United. But I wish him the best of luck.
Yeah. And Barry, I mean, it's so hard. I can't think of any highs. Are there any highs? There are the lows. There's losing against Grimsby.
Harry Maguire, maybe?
Yeah. Yes, Harry Maguire in that.
Even that night, Max, I decided to go out rather than watch that game. I just couldn't watch it. It's terrible. It's just. It used to be the first thought in my head when I was a kid, Manchester United, and eventually I'm watching box sets than watch Manchester United.
That could be age. That could just be age, John. Barry, your thoughts?
I think Amorim, I kind of alluded to it yesterday. I think he wanted to be fired. You don't make incendiary comments like that in a press conference without knowing there's a very good chance you will be sacked. It was a blatant act of insubordination, much the same as Enzo Maresca's. And if you behave like that and you don't have the results to back it up, you will get sacked. I think he wanted to be sacked. And I think he now gets to leave Manchester United, and he can say with some justification that he wasn't sacked because of bad results. He was sacked because he made these comments that the club hierarchy didn't approve of. And that's fair enough. He leaves with a big payoff. I don't think his reputation has particularly suffered. He's just some other bloke who's been through the Manchester United meat grinder, and he'll rock up somewhere else and he may very well be successful. I mean, he was very wedded to this 3-4-3 formation. As we know, he did change it a couple of times, occasionally to good effect. But Manchester United knew that when he came in, and they knew he needed the players to adapt to that. But as far as I can tell, they don't have the money to buy players now. So it was never really going to work. And for all that, I thought he was a nice bloke. I thought he was a welcome addition to the Premier League. I enjoyed listening to him talk. And I'd be interested to see where he ends up next.
He did say, look, not even the Pope would get him to change formation. Then he changed it for a game against Newcastle. He also at one point called his side the worst Manchester United side in history. I wonder, Noz, on your Amorim journey, like, has it always been this isn't going to work? Or have you had moments where you've thought, I've seen something here. I feel like we've had this conversation before. Like, I saw something, a thing. Or is that just like a helpless, hopeless fan clinging to something?
I mean, I completely agree with John in that a lot of it was just arduous to watch. And I mean, a lot of people in the last 24 hours or 48 hours have referred to underlying numbers, and underlying numbers are good. So that suggests that there was something going right, sort of within the sort of like formation or whatever. But this whole again, like hiring Amorim, like, what was the point? That's what the most frustrating thing is like, what was all this for? Like, when Liverpool were looking to replace Klopp, they had Slot and Amorim as their shortlist. They decided against Amorim because they decided that to employ a manager who was so wedded to that three at the back would be too much of a change and it would cost too much money, which has played out at United. So why did we go through all that period of him saying, I'm not going to change from three and back, not going to change from three at the back? You had Wilcox saying, trust the process. He's Amorim's doing the right thing. It's going in the right direction. And now, and then suddenly deciding, no, it needs to be four. Like, we need to change to four. When he has throughout, you can say what you like about Amorim. I agree. He's petulant. He's emotional. Really, as good a job as Jamie and others did in press conferences, he shouldn't have sort of took the bait. He should have had more sense and been more professional than to sort of like fall for that. But if there's one thing he is, it's he's honest, and he has been honest. This is how I play. So, like, in the end, you kind of think, we went through that as fans. We bought into that. You as a club told us he plays three at the back. It's the long game. We're going to waste half a season where we're going to be rubbish, but it's a longer process. And in the end, what was it for? It was for nothing.
Although, to be fair, you've never been on the end of the Jamie Jackson question at a press conference. You know, it's like the FBI, you talk and then he goes out, someone comes out, and then Jamie goes back in and says, the bad cop will get him.
Is Jamie a good cop or a bad cop?
He's bad cop, clearly. He's clearly get him in. He slams his head on the table and goes, you will testify, Ruben. You will testify. So look, Jamie, we've got Jason Wilcox, we mentioned a lot. You've got Omar Barada, the chief executive. You've got the head of recruitment, Christopher Vivell. And Ineos, and you've got Big Sir Jim. Ineos, and tell me if there's anyone I've missed, and there probably are thousands, all those bald guys sitting in the stand. Ineos always talk about like best-in-class decision-making, sort of great sort of LinkedIn bollocks. And like,
bullshit.
if you think about, thank you, John. If you think about, keeping Ten Hag after winning the FA Cup, giving him 200 million to spend, changing the whole backroom staff, getting rid of Ten Hag, appointing Ashworth, Dan Ashworth going, getting Amorim, backing him with lots of money, then sacking him. Like, I think fans are probably going, sorry, someone else's head needs to roll too. It's like, this is not best-in-class decision-making.
Yeah, 100%. The sort of, inside piece in today's Guardian that I wrote, basically, it says everything you just said then, sort of describe it as a morass at the club. And yes, I mean, Barada basically appointed Wilcox. They know each other from Manchester City. Now, when I did the story on Sunday night saying that he could go, his future's in the balance, I was told that in any sort of face-off or power struggle between Wilcox and Amorim, there'd only be one winner, not only because this is the structure, but because, Barada's wedded to Wilcox. So then you extrapolate from that and you say, well, so Jim Ratcliffe is like his own man, putting it politely. Some might say a loose cannon. He does what he likes, when he likes, sort of thing. And if he's now starting to, everything you've just catalogued then is basically embarrassing, humiliating, a farce. So if Jim Ratcliffe wakes up one morning and thinks, wait a minute, I'm looking like a bit of a chump here. And, and who's responsible for this? Well, it's Barada, actually. The chief executive who employed Wilcox. I could see a world or a scenario where one or both of those at some point are chopped. I'm not saying it's going to happen today or tomorrow, but you are completely correct. I mean, Ashworth's an interesting one. I think we all probably picked up on it. I think he went because he didn't fancy Amorim because of everything that Noz just said. What we're all saying, everyone could see. I mean, he thought it was a bad fit. I mean, I will just sort of drop in this: if you're an elite footballer, which Manchester United is supposed to deal in, we can all argue about how many they've actually got. You should, I would argue, a bit like a coach, be able to adapt your game, right? So you're playing, say, as a fullback, career fullback, you come up that way. If the coach turned around and said, well, I want you to play wing back, I don't think that's that big a step, because surely a full back's supposed to bomb up and down the wing, and defend as a sort of wing back. So there is that part of it. How much is that is an excuse? But as I several times during his tenure, which was 14 months, some of the stuff he was saying, some of the things you mentioned now, I was in the room for, the Pope thing, the worst team ever, and you're sitting there and you're thinking, this is like some sort of interesting experiment. How much of this are United, this is Ratcliffe, Barada, etc., going to accommodate before they go, wait a minute, he's got some novelty value at the start. He's got some collateral in the bank. He's just been employed, but as the results start to sort of nosedive and nosedive, and he's saying all this stuff. I got told a tale. I can't remember which game it was. Basically, it emerged that he'd smashed up a TV, but what I actually got told was he started crying. Yes, and he started crying about in the dressing room, wherever this TV apparently was smashed up, which he may have done as part of this. But I was told he was in tears, and that sort of took staff and whoever else was there a little bit aback, as if to say, this is an interesting development. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with tears. Don't get me wrong, but what I mean. In that context, it was a surprise. Yeah, I mean, I think someone said temperamental. You're completely correct about him, volatile. But again, you can do whatever you like in sport if you win, right? It's as simple as that, yes? We all know, like, Alistair Campbell's hired for the 2005 Lions in New Zealand to sort of spin Woodward, sort of whatever. But they're losing, so it doesn't matter he's out there with them, Alistair Campbell to spin because the results are there. And that this is why Ferguson, what it's like, like the sort of I was at the Grimsby game, the tactics board he gets out. It doesn't, if Grimsby is being stuffed 5-0, oh, he's not a genius, but you don't give a what's it, do you? Yeah, but because it's all about results, and so some of the things he was coming out with. I mean, I was sort of, as someone who's sort of been there since Ferguson, last season after Ferguson, covering them. I was thinking, this is a new development. They've got almost like a sort of I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like a sort of some sort of character out of a comic in a way. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but just sort of like so colourful and kind of in his own way vibrant. But yet, some of the stuff he was saying, I think John was right. In a way, you could say he's quite immature. The way in which, the whole part of the Pope quote was, "This is my existence." About the 3-4-3, not changing it. This is my existence. This is my life. How he believed in the 3-4-3, and you're just thinking it's not worth it that much, Rubes.
He didn't ask to be born, He didn't ask to be born. That's how he just. What I remember, I was sat with the great Jamie Jackson at one of these press conferences, and it was a game of Fulham we did earlier last year, and his behaviour in that press conference, because he's sort of smirking at some of the questions, like, "Oh, why are you asking me that?" And just like, it's like, that's not really how you're supposed to carry yourself. But I think the thing is, though, within that, I developed a bit of an affection for him. I didn't think he's a bad person or anything like that. But you're talking about the structure of the club. Jason Wilcox, now, there's a guy headed for, you would have thought, pariah status after this. He's the guy almost carrying the can for this now, isn't he? After the stories we've heard. I think most Manchester United fans would probably have Toya Wilcox in charge rather than him.
One for the dads.
She certainly is. But yes, it's like this sporting director thing. We've seen it with Chelsea. I mean, Chelsea have 5 sporting directors, so that creates this. They've got a 5-a-side team of sporting directors for the fans to hate, and that's what United fans have now, don't they? Because this sporting director structure that we have, of course, with Big Jim at the top, it doesn't make sense to us in England, even though they've had these things in Italy, in Spain. But one of the things is Jason Wilcox very rarely speaks on the record, so we don't really know much about him other than him being a player for Blackburn many years ago. And but say you're in Italy, the sporting director will speak and will just tell what's going on. So we don't really know what their thoughts are, and we don't hear them on the record too often. And they might give it off the record briefings to the likes of Sir Jamie here, but it's so you've got these people that people can't relate to, and they're making the decisions. And the thing is, if those decisions are good, sporting directors like Michael Edwards was lionised at Liverpool for a long time, are heroes. But the problem is they don't have anything tangible to back it up. And so people are like, what actually do these blokes do? And we don't know. And Amorim's job was to coach a team, which he wasn't particularly successful at. So people can judge him for that. And all you can judge the decision makers at Manchester United is the success of their decisions. And that decision making has been repeatedly disastrous since Big Sir Jim came in.
Yeah, Noz, would you like a total clear out? Like, what's the fans' desire?
I don't think it can. I don't think the blame starts and ends with Amorim. That's the thing. I don't want it to be seen as if like I'm defending Amorim, but it doesn't end with him. Like the whole the thing is that we had Fergie, and Fergie was this genius, this once in a multi-generational sort of like genius who could do so much, and he was a genuine manager. He was probably the last great manager in the old sense. But ever since, it's almost as if we've been looking for like the next Ferguson, and the next Ferguson doesn't exist. Not only because someone as good as Ferguson doesn't exist, but the role of Ferguson doesn't exist. So instead of getting one person who's going to magically make everything okay, what you need to do in the modern game is have the chain working. You need 4 or 5 people in the chain to be really, really good to succeed. And if anyone in that chain is not good, then it falls down. And the concern is it's such a mess. And I think the fans have lost all trust in Ineos and lost all trust in like the suits, because you've got Ashworth, who was brought in before Barada was in place. Barada sort of like, he wasn't Barada's guy. They got rid of him. Then they got Amorim, who was Barada's choice, but he wasn't Wilcox's choice. And then you've got Wilcox, who's a suit, who doesn't say at press conferences, who doesn't have to face Jamie, who sort of like is making these decisions, and then is. I find it weak that you've got Ratcliffe saying he wants to play 4 at the back, and Wilcox accepting that, and then sort of forwarding that on. And it's like, have some integrity about your role and your expertise. So then you've got Wilcox essentially telling Amorim how to set out his team. And this whole thing about Amorim being either a manager or a coach, even if he's the head coach, at the very least, give the head coach the autonomy to pick his team and pick his formation. If nothing else, let him do that. So, I mean, in short, it's all a mess. It's all going wrong, and whoever United employ next it's not going to work until anything else changes. You need to get rid of these blurred lines, and everyone needs to know exactly what their territory is.
The thing is, a lot of, or most of Sir Jim Ratcliffe's forays into sport under the Ineos banner have been unsuccessful. I flagged this up when he arrived on the scene at Old Trafford with David Brailsford as this Smithers-type character walking around, bowing obsequiously to him and holding a clipboard. But the Ineos, when he got involved or took over Sky Cycling, their performances nosedived. His Formula One team is bang average. His America's Cup, his sailing team got slaughtered in the America's Cup final by, I think it was New Zealand. Nice aren't particularly successful, or certainly weren't. And I'm not sure how they're getting on this season. But his forays into sport have been mediocre at best. So there is no reason to suppose that his involvement with Manchester United would be anything better than mediocre at best. He talks about a good game, but he is a bit of a windbag.
Well, I mean, in the words we don't like, on the Ineos wheel of words we like, words we don't like, making the same mistake twice, we don't like that. Don't do dumb shit, we don't like that. And of course, lukewarm cappuccino. I mean,
just a quick one. I was chatting to a friend of mine who's a former staff member at the club.
Yeah.
And he was at the big Sir Jim launch speech, to the staff. And Big Sir Jim came in and pretty much said, I'm here for a good time. I don't need the money. And within 18 months, everyone in that room pretty much is no longer at the club with cost-cutting exercises. I heard a story also of, and Jamie may know this, she was the receptionist, wasn't she, Kath, that died 18 months ago or so. And in the funeral, you walked in, basically, right-hand side, old-style Fergie era, left-hand side, Big Sir Jim era. No, these two parts of the club were not interacting at all. And there's this idea, isn't there, of people coming into a club and essentially the club is a host being for them rather than what the club was or is. And the old United, and I agree with Noz, we can't go back to relive the Fergie days. You can't try and retread history, but the cuts they've made, both with the past and financially, have ripped the heart out of the club. And so that's why you have this great big hole that Amorim found himself fighting against. Maybe he wasn't equipped to deal with it, but it appears those people who have been put in charge by Big Sir Jim aren't capable of dealing with it either. And that's the issue that we have.
Young Yorkville says, which former Manchester United player will be named caretaker manager in 2028 to replace the next manager? Gone back to some DNA, Jamie, with Darren Fletcher, who, ticks all the boxes, doesn't he, Jamie? He's well thought of at the club. He seems to be a good up-and-coming coach. He's got real connections with the club. Two of his boys are there, etc., etc. We've seen this before with Giggs, with Carrick, with Solskjaer. It probably is the right call for now, I get. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because he was at one stage the technical director, which was Jason Wilcox's first post, before he became director of football. So he's the under-18s coach now, and what I'm working up to say is he's he's now been promoted by the same people who kind of demoted him. And again, fair play to me, he's hung around. But what I'm getting to saying is, I just wonder what his fate is going to be long term at the club. They're talking about an interim possibly to the end of the season, but it might be an interim after this interim, or it might, so they might replace Fletcher with, a Carrick or whoever else, or it might be Darren Fletcher if he does well. I don't know. It all feels, a little bit sort of amateurish, to be honest. This whole not Fletcher. I mean, this what we're talking about here. The sort of where United have been. Since Ferguson left, basically. I mean, it's a work in progress that's been going on for sort of 13 years now, right? He left in May 2013. And it doesn't, it's Groundhog Day all over again, or whatever other cliche you want to sort of like recycle. I'll be at the game tomorrow at Burnley. They may well win, they may not, but I think structurally the club is in a lot of trouble. And it's interesting because I completely accept that Ferguson, as Noz said, he's definitely a genius, but he was a manager in sort of maybe a former time of football. But I actually think, if you actually think about it, if you wanted to sort United out, I think you actually do need a football person right, it can't be Ferguson because he's a one-off. I get that. Multi-generation is a great way of describing him, Noz. He's unbelievable abilities. But I actually think you need, kind of like Guardiola's got at City. So he has a director of football. It was formerly Big Aristine, obviously. But, he is the closest you've got to a Ferguson now, because nothing happens at that club that matters, without his say-so. And actually, again, what Noz says is correct, because they're at that club. They're all there to sort of serve Guardiola, and they're all sort of good at their jobs. You can have an argument about, or a debate about, sort of other stuff, the sort of, the country that owns the club and all the rest of it is politics, not particularly palatable. But Alma Barak's a good chairman. Soriano, sort of, is a good chief executive. But they're all like, it was all set up for Guardiola. That's why Pellegrini went in there, I think, for whatever it was, 2 years, because they're waiting for him to come from Bayern Munich. So, that City, I know United people don't want to hear, but City's, with regard to what I'm talking about, what Noz has basically said about how you have to have these people in the chain that are all really good. That is the best example I can think of, that I know of anyway. I know a little bit about. But actually, if you have a director of football, I still think that director of football has to defer to the manager stroke head coach, whatever you want to call it, because in the end, it's quite simple, right? You live or die by your results, and how do you get results? The players, and so if the manager should be allowed, or the head coach should be allowed to identify, and within reason. I'm not saying you give the head coach a blank check and he can buy sort of a left back from the dog and duck. But you know what I'm getting at? He has to have autonomy.
Sure.
What is the point in employing him? What is the point in sort of chucking £9 or £10 million a year at Amorim in this example? If actually you're going to sort of say, well, yeah, you've got all this money and you are. The manager of United, the head coach, has 3 jobs: lead the team on the field, the training ground, and the public face. Yes, the sort of PR stuff that we're talking about has kind of led to his downfall. But if you're not allowing him to sort of do it his way, why employ him? I just don't understand it. And so yeah, I mean, just to pick up what John sort of said. I actually think it should be part of the job description of the director of football, for example, the chief executive. They should come and see us, so the media, at least twice a year. Yeah, at least twice a year. There's a famous example where it was last season when Ten Hag was still in place, and Barad and Ashworth, as it were, had a sit down with us, the sort of patch people. It was on the sort of morning or midday of the Liverpool game, ahead of that game, which United lost. And you get them in the room, and it's interesting because you soon find them out. You soon have them contradicting themselves, sort of try to say one thing and then, okay, you've said that. What about this? And it's like. So they would soon learn very quickly, actually, how difficult it is for Amorim or any head coach. But, I really think, because then what would happen is, I sort of believe this is a good quality. They'd have a bit of empathy a bit of understanding for, the chief executive and the director will have a bit of understanding for what the head coach has to deal with in the public glare. And I think that would help everyone. But it's interesting what John said then, just very quickly to round this off. It is factionalised, the club, or actually it was factionalised until a lot of basically the former staff who he's called, have gone. So I hear this all the time from people who know this. There's a real division between the Ineos and sort of people and the non-Ineos people. And again, it's not rocket science. It's supposed to be a team sport, and that sounds a bit cheesy, but on the field and off the field. And if you're in a football club where people are thinking, well, am I going to be the next to be laid off, for example? How can that how can that ever have a nice, positive, right, we're all in this together? It's difficult enough anyway, isn't it, the Premier League, without having all this sort of like almost banana republic-like sort of politics to deal with.
Well, one presumes what will happen now is that Darren Fletcher will take a press conference today ahead of the Burnley game tomorrow. He will immediately be asked, do you have your eye on the job long term? He will, of course, say, no, I'm just focusing on the Burnley game. Then say he does something wildly controversial, like picks 3 at the back to face Burnley, beats them 7-0, and then goes on a bit of a run. So Manchester United go, hey, we were going to put in an interim after the interim, but Darren's doing well here, so we'll let him stay in charge. He goes on to qualify for the Champions League, and people will say, oh, well, you have to give Darren the job now. So they do. And then next season, it all goes pear-shaped again because the Darren bounce has worn off. I feel we've been here before.
Nos, there is a question from Halman Sadri. Says, who would even want to go there anymore? Seems like career suicide. Like, and I'm a United fan, he says. Like, I suppose that is, I sort of wonder on a sort of larger scale, it feels like this with Tottenham a bit as well. It's almost like it's impossible. Like, it is impossible to manage Manchester United well, but maybe the next person could do.
Yeah, I think it's the most pressurized job in football. I think it's the sort of, in a lot of ways, the worst job in football because you've got the worst of both worlds, because you've got an imperfect situation and you've got everything working against you in terms of it being chaotic and imperfect. The squad's not right, the hierarchy's not right, nothing's quite right. But no matter where United drop in the table or how bad they do, the scrutiny, the attention, the focus will always be red hot. That will never go down. It will never match. It will never be like the results go down. United are a rubbish team, therefore the attention goes down. That will never happen. United will always get engagement. United will always get rage. United will always be loved and hated. So that will. in that sense, it's the worst of both worlds, and that's the thing, because then you do start to think, you kind of think, okay, if they get the hierarchy in order and everyone accepts what their job is and sticks to it, then who would be the right manager? And going back to what Jamie said in terms of like, if there was like an equivalent of Fergie, the closest to equivalent of Fergie in football at the moment is probably Ancelotti, just in terms of somebody who's used to sort of play, well, used to managing in sort of a hierarchy. He's the most experienced. He's incredibly practical and pragmatic. He's a great man manager, so he would be an obvious choice. So that's one option. If you're looking,
he is used to working with really good players. Would be the only difference.
Yeah, that's. I mean, yeah. I mean, there was that incident at Everton. So I mean,
Yeah,
like,
of course. Yeah, okay.
He has struggled in the Granada region, so there's that. But I think in the past, United have tried to be far too cute in their appointments. Like they've tried to go for the next big thing or the next sort of like discovering somebody. Whereas a sensible but quite sort of unsexy choice would be Emery from Villa. But it goes back to what you're saying, Max, is, in a sense, why would Emery leave Villa? He's got the perfect setup. He's trusted there. He knows exactly what he's doing there. Why on earth would he sort of ruin his life and come to United? And you can say because it's Manchester United, and because it's the biggest game, because it's the biggest sort of like job in town. But is it really worth it? You've seen how happy Amorim was like leaving. Like it's almost become a joke of like how any player or manager when they leave United, like their skin cleans up, like they magically got more hair, like they just look sort of like far more happier in life, and
their teeth are whiter. Nice shiny coat.
But that's the thing. It's like who wants that job at the moment, and I mean, I even in terms of like the people you're looking at, like, okay, if you look at another pragmatic sort of coach, you look at someone like Pochettino, but getting anyone who's involved in the World Cup isn't summer going to be incredibly truncated? Isn't going to, like, in terms of transfers, in terms of pre-season, in terms of everything? It's just it's a perfect mess at the moment.
It seems weird that quite a few of the people being named as potential future managers at Manchester United have already made it extremely clear that they have no time for the kind of bullshit they will have to put up with from the guys in the suits that Dion Fanning famously called the Politburo of bullshit that sit in the stands for every game. So why would they go there? You know, Emery wants power, Glasner wants power, Tuchel wants power, and they want the kind of power that they're not going to get at United. So short of going solely for the money or by thinking, oh, I can, override this Politburo of bullshit, I can't, it just seems to be a feedback loop of this nonsense just going to happen over and over again.
Yeah, and as we've said before, anyone who isn't a United fan who grew up in the 90s, it's a wonderful circle of shit. But if you are a United fan, we feel for you. We will find out who will ruin their life, I guess, in the next few weeks or months, I guess.
In his press conference outburst, Amorim referred to the Nevilles. And I'm just wondering, right, so in the punditocracy at the moment, we have all these Manchester United players who played under Sir Alex Ferguson. We've got Rooney, Rio, Butt, Keane, Neville, Scholes, Hargreaves isn't as vocal as the rest of them. But they're all repeatedly sniping from the sidelines about how everything was better back in their day. Do you think that helps? And do you think that what they say genuinely influences what goes on at United behind the scenes?
Yes, I think it probably does. I mean, Jamie mentioned, this idea of Gary Neville's influence. Clearly, Jim Ratcliffe listens to the overlap, and the thing is, this has happened before. We talked about before how Liverpool had this back in the 90s, where you'd switch on the TV and Alan Hansen, Mark Lawrenson are there. It's just part of being a big club. You've got to deal with it. Part of running Manchester United. Manchester itself is an anarchic place. It's full of, think of the people that come from Manchester. It's a wild place. Sean Ryder, Tony Wilson, Nos, that are just completely out of control. And weirdly enough, Manchester City, as it was, reflected that when that was out of control. It was completely out of control. And the other side of town, United was out of control. They're both out of control, and it needed in Busby a godfather to run the club. Ferguson, another godfather, and then you've got City. They got a country in to actually sort this out maybe it's just Manchester's just mad, and you just can't do it. And so who are we going to find this person? Trump's available or whatever, and it's like it's maybe the impossible job, the unmanageable club, the unmanageable city. It's just too hard, and we're just going to have to live with it. And it's just going to have to live with the soap opera. And do you know what? We're doing a special pod because it's interesting, because it's Manchester United, and this is what they do. They sell papers, they get clicks, and it's all been nonsense for 13 years.
And long may it continue.
Yes, exactly. Yes. More, please.
Give it,
nonsense,
Gareth.
please.
Give it, Gareth.
That's what you want. Yeah, Gareth can't be at the wheel and take the handbrake off.